Hey guys, welcome to Settle for Three. Joey, Cameron, Evan. Guys, I was thinking about mixing up today's show and talking about the Elite Eight instead because I know you guys um, had a great time with that this weekend. Is there anything, Cameron, you'd like to say about your Alabama Crimson Tide?
I hate to say it, both Evan and I kind of found out what it looks like to not make the Final Four. Uh, for Alabama, it was a good season. It was a entertaining, you know, tournament in general.
Evan, Tennessee was brutal, dude. How did
Yeah.
you get through that?
Okay. I did not find out for the first time what it's like for Tennessee not to make the Final Four. In fact, they are now the leading team for the most Sweet 16 and Elite Eight appearances without a Final Four appearance. So it was a rough weekend.
Hey, I thought my Gators were out too. I mean, down with nine with 4 minutes left, and to have that comeback was pretty incredible. So. We'll see what they can do. I think Duke's really good. But guys, this podcast is about football, so let's talk football. And we're going to talk about the UFL, which is something we've never really done here before, and that's because you two love the UFL.
I
I
heard.
don't dislike the UFL, but I don't really watch it. So what I want your guys' goal to be is to convince me by the end of this episode why I should watch the UFL on a regular basis. So are you guys up to the challenge?
Easy.
Easy money, right? All right, well,
Easy.
let's go on. First, let's talk about the UFL a little bit before we get into our week one reactions. And what is the UFL? United Football League, premier spring football platform formed by the merger of the XFL and the USFL in 2024 under the combined ownership of Redbird Capital Partners, Fox, Danny Garcia, and Dwayne The Rock Johnson. The UFL's 10-game schedule started this past Saturday, March 28th, and the league is divided into two conferences, the USFL and XFL. Games are broadcast on Fox and ABC mainly, but there are a few games on ESPN and FS1. So, Cam, let's start with you and just give us a little more background on the league. And it's already made a 1 year, right? So it's doing a lot better than other spring leagues. It bodes well
It's
for the future.
actually it's actually made it a couple of years. You kind of have to go back just to look at how the XFL and the USFL came together because there were a couple of years where they tried to compete with each other. There were a couple of years where one happened and the other one didn't. Now that they've kind of figured out this formula, they have the right investors. I actually think they have a pretty functionally sound league. Hopefully the talent is there. Week one, we'll look at the scores in a moment. May or may not be. But as far as it going forward, I really do think that the UFL really will have a presence for the spring and summer going forward.
Evan, do you think this league continuing is more about them keep getting sponsors or about people actually tuning in? Because they can air stuff that no one's going to watch as long as they have the money to do it, right?
Yeah, look, honestly, it's kind of a catch 22, right? It starts with viewership and making it more popular. And that's what happened when The Rock came
Hmm.
and really purchased both leagues and made it into one UFL, right? So that was kind of the first step. After that, it's just got to become more popular, right? They've got money backing it, but the XFL and the USFL, the reason that they fell apart was because there was not enough money in the sports. A lot of people came into it, they invested in it, but that was really for the gambling behind it, or
Hmm.
excuse me, behind it, and just kind of making it more exciting in that way. But when The Rock came into it, it was more about him making a spring league, right? And that has slowly started to become more of a point.
Hmm.
So I don't really think it's one or the other. I think it does start with viewership, but after that, yeah, they've already gotten last year, the year before, ESPN. You wouldn't find UFL on there.
No.
This is the first year that's become a thing, and it's just going to become easier to access the information about the leagues, and that's how the sport's going to grow.
And I think those leagues will keep pumping it up as long as they decide they keep wanting to invest in it. So we'll see if catches on viewership wise. But moving on to the teams, we got eight of them, four in each conference. And Evan, we'll keep with you here. We got three teams in Texas. Most of these teams are here in the Midwest, except for DC. I'm counting Birmingham kind of as the Midwest, middle section of the country. Do you like where these teams are? Do you think we'll see expansion, or you think the league is kind of just good with where they're at right now?
Yeah, first of all, as to expansion, I mean, the UFL's already started talks with expansion going into 26 for the 2027 season. It is weird right now. There's a big cluster of teams, especially around Texas, right? And that's not totally abnormal, right? Like in the NFL, we've got Houston, we've got Dallas. So it's not totally abnormal that you've got a cluster of teams over there. The biggest thing is that the UFL has to have some more underserved markets. Cameron and I, we've been to Birmingham Stallions games.
Hmm.
They're fun, right? They're not in Tuscaloosa. You're not going to have Birmingham Stallions playing in Tuscaloosa, right? So you
That
have
would
to
be
look,
epic, by the way.
That would be
exactly.
great.
Well, you have to look at cities that are right for we really want more football teams, but we don't want them competing with our football teams. The UFL, in the way that it is right now, is not going to compete with the main time, but they can substitute that portion of the year right now where all of us, we all want to see football year round.
Yeah. Uh,
But we need a league and we need a marketing strategy that's going to make us really excited. This is what's going to solve that. And you can't have it just in these markets. Like I said, they've been in talks about trying to expand to a 12 team by 2027. That's going to be a big step in the right direction, but they have to do it in a way that's going to keep it exciting. It's going to make it competitive. So it's not just the same teams playing each other over and over again. And it's just going to make it fun for the viewers to watch.
Hey, I want to make one comment. When the NFL and the AFL, like going way back 50s, 60s kind of time frame, when they were really getting started, those leagues were founded on, 4, 6, 8 teams, and they eventually grew. They had to build their market in order for them to actually work. Right now, I think that's where the UFL stands is they're trying to get market within those. Most of these are small market teams, or at least a lot of them are. They're trying to grow those bases. And then once they have at least a base, they're able to expand, and it's not going to eat their entire pocket to do it. It's all
my
about
thing,
having some revenue and not expanding too soon.
yeah, and I totally agree with that. My main issue is, and I know these were teams that came over from the original leagues and they merged. But why to Evan's point, why do we have four teams in NFL markets? Like, why don't we have a team in Orlando or a team in not Seattle, but
Well,
a team in Portland or a team in
Joey,
San Diego?
if you look at it, what state has the best football in the country
I mean,
historically?
Texas, but there's only so much of an attention span to go around nowadays, dude.
Yeah.
This isn't the age of appointment television. If
So,
people are going
yeah,
to be going to the breweries on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons instead of watching this.
totally agree. And that's one of the reasons that I love the UFL, but I do think they made a miss with having so many teams in Texas, right? Because you have, to Cameron's point, high school football in Texas is huge. That's
Mhm.
on Friday nights. Saturday nights, you have college, also huge with Texas and Texas A&M, and
But they're
M,
not competing with those
and a
markets.
lot of other colleges in there. Then you got Sundays. We have Houston and Dallas. You have so much football, and not only that, but you have so much airtime packed into Texas. This should be spread out a little bit more. You have to have more buy-in, right? Which I do think is coming, especially after the last couple of years where the UFL has expanded a lot more. And you have to have a lot more underserved markets, people that love football, they love college football, they love professional football, but in the other parts of the year, there's nothing for them to watch, right? Alabama, let's be honest, they're not watching any sports but football, right?
Yeah.
Birmingham Stallions makes 100 so much sense over there because outside of your regular football seasons, you have nothing else. You also don't have an NFL team to back up on and take you all the way through February. So find some other markets. I think it's coming. And I do think it's the main focus of this entire league right now in expanding.
And before we move on, just one more point for me. The only problem I have with expansion is you're going to oversaturate the market. You'll see when we get to week one, these games are already barely watchable. You can convince me otherwise if you want to, but
Mhm.
unless unless you're a hardcore fan of a team, and these teams have only been around 2, 3 years, they're hard to watch. So what are you going to do by expanding? The talent's just going to be at a lesser and lesser level. So I think that's a problem they'll have to deal with. But let's move on to, I think, the core of why this league was created, and that's the players. And Cam, I'll have you start on this one. But each team carries a 75-man roster in the training camp before the regular season rosters are trimmed down to 50 players, 45 active on game day. They include college and NFL players, as you know. Some of these players want to go to the NFL. Some of these players are former NFL players that maybe, are washed up in the league, for lack of a better term, and just like playing football. So they're veterans like the AJ McCarron types. The UFL has embraced a developmental league mentality, as we were saying earlier. That's the Rock's goal, and the player and league are currently having a labor dispute, which, I feel like we may have not seen the season get off the ground if players really wanted to do something about it. But my feeling is these guys just want to play and get exposure, so maybe they're willing to overlook a few things that players in other leagues wouldn't. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're hitting it from the right point, Joey. The league exists. Obviously, viewership is how they bring in revenue, so super important. But for these players, there's never been a good competitive league in the United States for them to play after college that isn't the NFL. And my favorite part in the past of watching these UFL games, week one is probably not the best representation just because, like preseason football in the NFL, week one in college, it's not good. Once they get to week 5, 6, 7, and they're midway through the stretch, really expect the play or the level of play to get a lot better than it currently is. These players, when they are operating at high capacity, they do have NFL talent. Adrian Martinez is now, he replaced Aaron Rodgers up at the Jets. There's a number of these players that have made NFL rosters. They are genuinely good. And I love seeing them get that effort. The last thing that I want to note is for a lot of these guys, this really is their final opportunity to try and get that push. Whether they missed the draft or got cut by their NFL team, they have one chance. They can make it back in there. And to watch them give 10 tenths during some of these games is awesome.
And Evan,
Yeah.
I got a question for you I want to pose real quick. I feel like what this league is missing is a official partnership with the NFL. Some sort of minor league, major league connection. I don't know what that is. We don't have time to really hash out what that is. But I feel like that's what this league is missing, is some sort of partnership that these players get more exposure with either specific NFL teams in a region or scouts or the league in general. What do you think?
Yeah, the league really needs to figure out what its identity is going to be.
Yep.
Is it for players that came out of college and didn't get drafted? Or is it for players that did get drafted, didn't work out, and so they get pushed down to the UFL? And there's a whole lot of excitement that goes on for these players that they didn't really get drafted or they didn't really do well, and they get pushed back up to that next level. And really, last year was the first year that this happened by a couple of different players with getting put back into the NFL. So UFL has to really decide what its personality is going to be. Are we for just the people that are, I don't know, trying to make a show of it? Or is it for the people that are really putting in the work? They got that chance and they're trying to get back, or they never got that chance and they have something to prove. And that's what they have to figure out over the next year or so.
I mean, I think minor league baseball does it the right way. You go to a minor league baseball
Mhm.
game, Birmingham Barons, or where I live in Charlotte, the Charlotte Knights, and you don't really care what the final score is. You're going to have a good
Go
time.
and have a good
But
time.
but the players take it seriously because there's scouts from MLB teams there, and that's their opportunity to move up to the bigs. And so I think the UFL has to kind of, like you said, find that identity where the games are enjoyable for fans to go to, because that's how
Mhm.
these teams are going to make money outside of their TV deals, is getting people to show up on a Saturday afternoon in the spring when it's nice outside. But you also want to give the players something to play for besides just, you know, the love of the game.
100%.
Cameron, you're dying to say something here, aren't you?
I am. I think the couple of misses that are coming in and trying to pull both viewership and get the players more. Look, I think viewership makes the players act better on the field, period. It doesn't matter if you're an injured guy coming out of the NFL or you're trying to make your way from nowhere into it, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Uh, I think the problem is actually some of the stadiums, that and the lack of mobility of these
Mm.
teams. I don't have an issue with two teams being in Texas. I look at it almost with like, and please don't hate me for this reference. The Savannah Bananas are basically a baseball team, if you will, that
Not real
travels across
baseball,
the
but they're
country,
fun.
but they bring people to the
Yeah.
games to come and enjoy. There is
Yep.
no reason why they can't offer better drink discounts that people in their cities want to go have a beer at the game. There's
Hmm.
no reason that they can't do autographs before the game like an Alabama spring game. There is no reason why they can't do more of these things to try and get the viewership that they need. And I promise the best of these talent will come to the table. And in the NFL will want more to do with you. And you have your own, your own name and your own image. You're not just a subsidiary of what you want to be.
I I don't want to be a naysayer, but I just don't think people are ever going to sit down on a Saturday in the spring and say, let's watch the UFL. But I think these teams can really get a fan base in the local communities if they market it right, and they can give players a chance by having some sort of deal with the NFL.
Joey,
And
people in the Northeast don't sit down on Saturday and watch football anyway.
no, in
It's
the
all
fall they
about
do.
reaching.
In the fall they
No, they
do.
don't. You think at Rutgers they're watching football?
Rutgers is the worst example you could give. What about
And I mean,
Ohio
there's a
State,
plethora of teams in the Northeast that
Penn
don't care.
State?
That's one. I'm not saying Midwest, and Penn State's kind of getting out. Anyway, well, I digress.
It's a dumb point, Cameron.
Yeah, terrible.
Valid.
Just awful. Okay, let's move on to something less awful. I actually really like a lot of the UFL rules. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not. I've never talked with you about it. But they have several innovative rules from previous leagues that they kind of combined together. Point after touchdown, there's 1, 2, and 3 option attempts. Alternate possession option. Instead of doing the onside kick, you can take a 4th and 12 from your 28-yard line and convert and keep the ball. And then overtime is alternating attempts to score. And I think it's best out of 3 format or something like that. But Evan, do you like these rules, or do you think they're kind of gimmicky?
I love these rules, and honestly, so does the NFL. Like they've already taken certain rules, like the kickoff rule, for example,
Yep.
and just tweaked it a little bit to make it their own. These rules are awesome, right? It's weird watching a touchdown that's not followed by an extra point in the traditional way, but now teams can make it much closer of a game by going for 1, 2, or 3 points, depending on where it is. And the viewership, we get more enjoyment out of it by seeing an extra play, right? I think these are so cool, right? And the onside kick point or on that. Yeah, you know what? They don't need to kick an onside kick, but you can go for 4th and 12 or whatever it is. How many of us would love to see when we're driving down the field to have our team just have one extra play when we're clicking on all cylinders and we just happen to get stopped, to just be able to make it? I think these are really cool points that need to be made, and a lot of them, in my personal opinion, accomplish the goal of trying to be a little bit safer as a sport, where you're not having 24 people run at each other full blast. You're just having a couple of guys create an extra play. So I love these ones. I don't have any problem with a lot of these rules. Maybe I'd tweak some of them, but all in all, I love them. Cameron?
I have two things that I love in the UFL. The first one is the ability to challenge anything. You can challenge a penalty, you can challenge a traditional thing like whether or not someone was out of bounds, and it's basically a universal challenge flag. I wish that that would be adopted at the higher levels.
It'd be
That's
so
both
good.
with college and the
You just
NFL.
get one?
It's the best role.
Do you just get
I'm
one?
sorry.
You just get
You
one,
get
right?
one.
One
It
and a
is a
half, or
universal challenge unless you get it
okay.
or unless you're correct in your challenge. But you can use that on whether or not there was a holding penalty, whether or not there was pass interference, whatever it may be. I think that is the best thing ever. And then you're granted another one if you're correct.
So
Which,
can you?
by the way, they are trying to make a little bit closer to a thing in the NFL now with having reviews cover penalties also. So they're
You
slowly going towards this anyways. The UFL is just ahead of the curve.
and Cam, I know you had one more point, but NFL execs are watching all of this because the NFL tends to play it safe on a lot of things, because they play it very PC for lack of a better word because it's a business at the end of the day, and this is a very successful business. So they're watching this, so I think this is a great exposure for the UFL. Cam, did you have one more point?
I have one more, and I
Okay.
actually think this one should be incorporated into the NFL tomorrow.
Okay.
And this is its first time being used at the professional level at all. There is now a tracker inside of the ball. There was an instance this weekend where the runner on 4th and short ran for the first down and was about an inch and a half short, less than what the margin of error probably is when you're looking at it with your eyes. The implementation of that and to see exactly where the ball is the single greatest thing since the yellow first down marker. I don't know how other leagues are not already adopting that. That is the single greatest thing that the UFL has done thus far.
Why isn't that in the NFL?
I think it's the same reason as they don't allow challenge flags for referees. I think it's actually a protection of the refs, if you want to know the truth.
Really? Like
Yeah.
their jobs?
Once you start challenging
Yeah.
an official's right to call, there comes
Yeah.
to question a lot more. I think you would have official unions.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into it. There's a lot of problems with why they don't throw challenge flags on penalties. When the NFL had it for the one season on pass interference, not a single one was overturned in all of the times that it was challenged.
Yeah. You have to look at it. Karen and I were watching the Birmingham Stallions game, and the VP of what is it, football referee operations, whatever. He's not on the field.
Yeah, the guy up in the box.
He's calling it. No, he's not even in the box because he's doing all 4 games. He's basically working from home as a referee. Yeah, the rules are to protect the refs on the field. You can do so many of these jobs with the technology today that is just insane to think about a few years ago.
Do y'all agree with how fantastic it is to put the tracker technology in the ball?
It's huge.
I do. Don't you want to get the calls right at the end of the day?
Every time.
Yeah.
Right.
How many times do you hear the yellow line is just an estimate of where the ball is or where the first down marker is? Now we can actually have indisputable evidence of where.
I will throw one thing out there to y'all. Sometimes in circumstances where ratings might outweigh a win or a loss.
Alabama?
No, I mean, you could look at this for the Chiefs and the Bills when they played. There's sometimes opportunities where an inch defines a game, and you may miss something by a misinterpreted inch by a referee. If you have a tracker in the ball, there can't be a miss.
Yep.
It goes back. I'm not a believer of all the, crap that exists that the NFL is rigged, but I do think that there may be a little bit in there for sway when it becomes a conversation.
Okay. Well, we've talked about the league. Let's talk about week 1, shall we? Here's scores. I feel like no one's going to look at these scores and go, wow, what a great week of football. Birmingham lost. Sorry for you guys. And then St. Louis Arlington and Michigan all won. So I guess, Evan, I'll start with you, and I want each of you to just tell me what you liked and didn't like from week one and what were your general observations.
Number one, I liked the defenses. I did not like the offenses.
Fair.
And so okay, here's my take, right? When you look at the UFL, a lot of it is going back to some old school football. If you look at the stats from this last weekend, rushing yards and defenses were the stories of the entire weekend. Birmingham and Cameron and I are big Birmingham fans.
Big
Right?
McGuff guys.
We go to these.
No.
We love them, right? The quarterback Alex, and we're kind of still up in the air about his last name. It's McGuff. He threw it for 89 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and that pretty much covers the UFL, right? Like he was drafted from FIU, I believe, to Green Bay and converted to a receiver. He's played receiver for the last however many years, and all of a sudden he's back at being a quarterback. And it's not like they didn't have a backup quarterback who's from Ole Miss and had a pretty good career over there.
It was a third-round pick in the NFL.
He was a third-round pick, which is actually better than what Alex was. But you have to be able to give these people reads. And Cameron and I, we were both watching this. He was getting 1 read per play, 1 given to him. It's not like he was only making 1 read, but he only had 1 for the entire time. And so you look at these games, the defenses were pretty stellar, if I'm being honest. The offenses, you had a ton of players break over 100 yards, and Cameron absolutely hates this apparently. But all in all, I would equate this to a regular preseason NFL game. I don't think there's a whole lot of differences here with those. I would love to see the UFL have at least 1 preseason game to kick these teams into gear, because it's just not fair when they've come off completely cold. They've had a couple practices and go straight into a game when your season is so short.
Well, Cam, I know you have a boatload to say, but first, a point I made earlier. A point I made earlier in Fox's game this weekend. I don't even know who was playing, but they dumped out of it in the fourth quarter to show an MLB pregame show. Not the game, not the first pitch. They dumped out of it to show a pregame show. So I think you even had the network saying, worried. We need to see some better football on the field. Would you agree, Cam?
Yeah, we already alluded to it. Evan got it right. When you look at college football, NFL football, those first couple of weeks, whether you have a preseason or not, are never going to be all the gears clicking. I think this is a perfect indication that a couple of teams figured it out a little bit more than the others, but none of them are in great shape right now, and none of them are feeling like they're in midseason playing order either. I think that's completely normal. Now, in full transparency, I only watched 1 game this weekend. That was the Birmingham Stallions game. I agree with Evan on the first half of Magoo. Magoo was making 1 singular pre-read and not making any additional reads. Once he started to settle in the second half, he actually wasn't doing bad until the defense learned that they could blitz, bring pressure, and then they would either get to him or he just would throw the ball away. That's going to be an issue going forward for the Stallions. And I do think that the DC defenders' defense is pretty good. But Teamu also had moments of looking great on the first drive and then just went down a hill and then went back up. It was like a yo-yo. But yeah, whole league, wait for it to click week 3 or 4. I think it'll be a lot better to watch.
So, we can knock this week 1 all we want, but you guys watched the Stallions game. Did you enjoy sitting there watching it?
Loved it. I had a great time.
All right.
Yeah, we were right next to each other, and we were screaming at the TV. It's so much fun. And
Screaming?
I'll stop there before I go too far into the next part here.
Joey, the best part of that is that right next to the TV that we were watching on the bar or at the bar had the Tennessee basketball game, and Tennessee
Oh,
was just getting obliterated. So you talk about
We don't need
viewership. I actually think the USFL had better viewership than the Tennessee game where they put up 15 points and a half.
oh boy. Well,
Cameron, remember we were just agreeing with each other. We had a stalemate here. We didn't need to keep talking about
he's
that.
a bitter Alabama fan, so he's gonna get it in when he can. But let's move on to the
They
last
did
word.
lose.
More or less better.
Yeah. All right, Evan, last word.
So here's the thing, and I'm going to go off what Cameron and I just said. We both had an awesome time watching the UFL. And a little bit of story here. I grew up a Tennessee fan. Cameron grew up an Alabama fan. We decided that we wanted one team to root for together. That's what the UFL is, right? It's not a league that you are digging in your heels, creating rivalries right at this second with all your friends. It's a league that you can come together with and just have an awesome time watching. One of the things that they have to figure out is how to get people to watch them. And that starts with, at this point, they have games on Fridays, they have games on Saturdays, they have games on Sundays. They are taking whatever rights they can get. And which, Joey, that leads to your point where they cut away for a pregame show for baseball, right? They are competing with opening weekend for baseball. They're competing with March Madness.
No.
They have to figure out these designated times that they can get and push out to the fans, however many or however little there are that can tune in and watch them. This
Okay.
league is going to expand, and it's going to expand into 12 teams in the next couple of years, which I think is going to help immensely, so that you don't just have the same 8 teams playing each other over and over again with a 2-week playoff period. It's going to expand. It's going to become a lot better. And right now is the time that you can start to get fans into these seats, into watching these games, so they can buy these jerseys. They can buy, all the dumb stuff that Karen and I bought when we were at these games, so that you can just be a fan. I mean, how often do you get to be a fan of a league where, let's be honest, there's no pressure, and you can
Yeah.
just root to your heart's content and just be happy to root for them. So that's my thing on this one, guys. Just root for the sport. Tune into a couple games. Try and find a couple players that you recognize, because we do that every single time. Google them on your phone. It's so fun to watch these people from where they came from and root for where they're going.
Oh, Cameron, you were skiing last week. Didn't you see an ad wherever you were?
I did. I was in
What?
Wyoming and saw an ad for the USFL, which is at least 1,500 miles away from there.
Oh boy,
But
this was a
yes,
good
I did.
opportunity for you guys to wear your sweatshirts. You guys both have sweatshirts, right?
Oh,
Absolutely.
we were in our jerseys and sweatshirts watching the Birmingham Stallions game.
Absolutely.
All right, so Cam, sell me. How do you make a non-believer like me into a believer?
If you're not at the game, cheap beer. If you
Fair,
are at the game,
fair.
cheap beer. Cheap beer plus football equals happiness. That is how to get to a man's heart.